I believe that this is probably the single best piece of cardiovascular equipment you can have in your home, in your gym, in your training space, period. I really don't think it matters what your goals are. If you want to just build general aerobic fitness, if you want to build really solid aerobic conditioning that's robust, you have that strong aerobic base, but also that aerobic peak. And even if you want to develop speed and power and some of those more sprint specific, let's call it properties, you can get all of this with the Rogue Echo Bike. This, I'm not sponsored to say this, I have no partnership with Rogue. This is just the best piece of aerobic equipment I've ever bought, purchased, used. I have one at home, I have one in my gym. And if I were getting more cardio equipment, I'd get more of this. And I want to go over why I love this bike, all the different ways I use it with my clients, all the different ways you can use it at home or in your training space for what I think is an unbeatable cost. I think if you go to any of the places where aerobic equipment is sold, whether it's like a fitness supply store or even a big membership club like Costco, you'll see rowers, treadmills, spin bikes, even just spin bikes, all starting at least $1,000. Sometimes things in the aerobic fitness category can get into the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 range. And this thing comes in at under $1,000 shipped to you, which to me is hard. It's hard for me to communicate in terms of like a home setup, how valuable this piece of equipment is. From a just quality and durability standpoint, I would guess that this would probably go as close to like lasting a lifetime as possible. I've had this in the studio for 3 years and it gets used for, I'm not kidding you, probably at least 2 to 3 hours of direct work a day between people warming up and using it. And it looks, feels, and moves brand new. So let's talk about why this is such a cool piece of equipment compared to just a traditional bike and why I like it more than everything else. The first point is versatility. So like I said, you can use this for aerobic base work. You can use this to develop your whole aerobic pyramid, your aerobic base and your aerobic peak, which would be how hard and how high you can push and for how long. And you can use this to develop sprint speed in the safest way possible for the most people. If I told you I want you to develop sprint speed using a treadmill, you would have to sprint using real sprinting mechanics, which most people do not have. If I told you on the bike, I want you to develop that property of sprinting and high output, while you wouldn't build the mechanic the way you would on the treadmill, you can push tremendous force into this bike very quickly with a little to no understanding of technique and have like 1/10 of the drain on the body that comes with actually sprinting. So for normal people who want to develop a robust aerobic metabolism and have a really, really strong different properties, but don't want to actually sprint or run or go out and pound the pavement, you're not going to find anything better than this. You can ride, let's talk about it piece by piece, starting with the high-end sprints, and then we'll work through the other stuff. With these, like with the high-end work you can do on this piece of equipment, you can do intervals, and like I said, it's very easy to sprint and work up to these super high outputs because this is a essentially fan-fed machine. The more wind I produce in this fan wheel, the more drag there is. So the faster and the more powerful the athlete, the harder the output, the higher the output. If I'm pushing hard and I'm weak and frail, it's going to feel less hard than if I were super big and jacked. So this really scales to however hard your highest output is, which is amazing. Because if you're on a treadmill or a Stairmaster, you're simply increasing miles per hour or floors per second. And on this, or even on a bike, like a spin bike, you're just dialing up the friction. On this, your max resistance is always connected to your true max output. So it makes it a real actual opportunity to push the highest output possible. And I don't think people really need to sprint too much, but a little bit of sprinting goes a long way and it can help keep you fast and powerful. And to do it here on something that's really safe and actually allows you to use upper body mechanics these kind of contralateral mechanics where, like, when you sprint, you have opposite arm, opposite leg, and on this bike, you have opposite arm, opposite leg. I don't think you can beat that. And if I said to somebody, hey, if you sprint once every 7 days for like 2 to 3 rounds of 10 to 15 seconds to just stay fast, and you'd never get hurt, and you could do it on this, it would beat every other way to do it. Now, for just building, let's say your overall aerobic capacity, your total aerobic fitness, not your sprint stuff, not the cherry on top, but like the big bulk of the cake, this thing is ridiculously functional. I can roll as I would on a recumbent cycle, which is 90% of bikes. Think Peloton, think the seated back, like leaning back, old person cycle at the gym. You can simulate that here. You do not actually have to use your hands. This will give you a crazy pump in your quads, and it will also, again, allow you to simulate the aerobic kind of low-level recumbent cycle machines. There's also the ability to turn this into a hand bike. Hand bikes or hand ergometers are pretty popular devices for like upper body rehab or for people who don't have good function in their lower limbs. And so if you wanted to, let's say, increase shoulder extension or promote little thoracic rotation, or just do cardio on a hand ergometer, instead of buying a whole separate machine, you can just put your feet on the foot pegs and literally use your Echo bike to train your upper body, which to me is badass. That dual functionality is awesome. If you wanted to, like, add some conditioning work at the end of a push-pull session, hello, why don't you do like a mile on the bike using just your arms? If you want to flush your quads after leg day, you can do a mile or 5 on the bike, just your thighs. And if you want to develop very robust aerobic conditioning, you can do the bike the way it's supposed to be used with the arms and the legs for any single, short to long-term duration thing you could think of, whether it's steady state or intervals. There's so many cool settings on this that you can actually pre-program, or that come pre-programmed, that almost anybody in the general population could build their aerobic fitness. Some of my favorites are to just use it by pressing target distance and ratcheting up to something challenging. For a normal, adult, 3 miles on the bike will be challenging. For somebody with moderate aerobic fitness, maybe 5 to 8 miles. And for somebody with good aerobic fitness, we can go all the way up to 10 miles. And all you're doing when you're setting these programs is setting a cap, and you'll work down from that, and you can see how much watts you're producing in terms of force, your speed in miles per hour, how many calories you burn. You can sync it with a heart rate monitor if you like. But again, this is a tool that's now letting us cycle for distance using total body movement, including the arms. That's really nice. Let's say instead of training for distance, I'd like to train for caloric expenditure. I can actually set this up to be done on the basis of caloric expenditure. So going down from 15 calories all the way to 0. So maybe I want to burn some calories. I can use this as a tool for that. My personal favorite are the interval programs that come preloaded. So I'll show you how these work very simply. You can set a 10-20 interval. In the first 10 seconds, you'd sprint as much as possible. And then in the back 20 seconds, you would recover. So after that 10-second work, you get a 20-second cool down. And you can flip that into a 20-10, 20 seconds of work, 2 more 10-second rest. So just what's pre-programmed on here allows you to develop high-intensity interval fitness in a way. You can do some HIIT training, so get some high output and some low consistent work. You can spin for time, you can spin for energy output, and I think that alone is more than enough for what most people really need to develop aerobic fitness. I think with so many of the common, popular aerobic equipments, what you're paying for is a monitor with programming that's going to entertain you. This is not as entertaining. However, it's extremely functional. And I think you're going to be totally capable of building a strong aerobic base as well as an aerobic peak using what's pre-programmed. But the last thing I want to highlight is just how functional is this as a piece of equipment for doing cardio, and how accessible is it. And I think that this is pretty tough to beat because I've seen it used by so many people at my studio. We have clients who are super tall, and this seat can go very, very high. You could probably use this seat. I have seen somebody who is 6'10" use this bike. It goes all the way up here, and you have full ability to adjust the seat all the way back here. So that means on the flip side, it comes all the way forward, and it comes all the way down. So you have a ton of versatility with this bike. And for most people, I've noticed if you have it around 4 to 6 and about 4 inches back, not like 50 to 75% of people can just jump right on it and use it as a piece of cardio equipment. It takes up less space than you would think on a floor plan. So I'll give you guys a little bit of an example. I can just show you how maneuverable it is in the gym. I think when people get fitness equipment like treadmills, they underappreciate the footprint in a negative way. Like a treadmill is a very immovable, kind of unyielding piece of equipment, and that is many people's go-to. And smaller bikes like a Peloton, for example, might have a little more mobility, but with the casters and the fact that this thing has the same sized foot plate and kind of front end plate, you can squeeze it in to some pretty tight quarters. And I don't know, just as an example, like, not that it would be usable here, but like you can squeeze this thing in, if you're careful, to a lot of different places. And I think you could probably have this in your house, even though you might think of it as more of a gym piece or like a garage gym piece, and use it for all of your aerobic equipment or uses. The best part about anything like this, compared to treadmills, ellipticals, and things that rely on really big monitors, this thing doesn't have a lot of pieces that can break. It has a giant fan, an incredibly strong, basically piece of synthetic leather stripping that pulls the fan, and that's attached down here to the foot plate. And that's pretty much it. Like, these handles can be tightened using an Allen wrench. These almost never need to be tightened. The casters never need to be adjusted. There's so few things on here that can break. It makes it super easy to maintain even at high uses. And if you've ever worked in a commercial gym, you'll know treadmills, ellipticals, Stairmasters break all the time because they have tons of pieces. Another thing that's really cool about this is you can use the center plate to step up if you are somebody who struggles to get onto the bike. And you can buy a wind guard, a cup holder, a phone holder for it. I just use the wind guard accessory because I don't like a ton of this wind blowing back in my face. But if it's summertime, you could actually take it off and get all the wind back. So for my money, the Rogue Echo bike is probably the best piece of cardio equipment. I think it's the most versatile piece of cardio equipment for your home gym, for your garage gym, or just for building a totality of aerobic fitness for most people because of how easily accessible it makes interval training and high output work. And again, it allows you to do that low level stuff with just the arms, just the legs, or both together in a way that even a recumbent or good bike won't. So 2 thumbs up if you liked this video kind of walking through equipment and want to see more. Be sure to leave what equipment you'd like to see in the comments. Hit a thumbs up to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.